Okay, the Iranian foreign minister won't shut up. This guy's all smiles. This guy's happy as he can be. It's striking. You know what I think? They came to an interim agreement just to save face for Obama. Why wouldn't you? If you're the Iranians and you know that you're going to end up getting a nuclear weapon out of this, why wouldn't you do whatever it took to help the American president make that possible? And if he needs an interim agreement today to sell this to the rest of the world and his own people, then let him have it. I'm sitting here. I can remember again being on the golf course. I can remember being on the golf course during the Bush presidency, George W. Bush, and I remember just a whole bunch of people opining on the whole concept of Iran getting a nuclear weapon, and I remember all of the things people said to me, and they were all rooted in the same thing. One thing I like about Bush, you know, with Bush, the Iranians will never get a nuke. Bush will never sit for it. That'll never happen with Bush in the White House. It was a big deal, is the point. The Iranians getting a nuclear weapon was a huge deal to a lot of people. Now, like the millennials don't care, they couldn't care less. All they care about is that civil rights might be being denied in Indiana somewhere. They couldn't care less about it. Obama wants a deal with Iran, much like he wanted to be the first president to get a health care bill, just to get an agreement. But who are we making an agreement with? The state world sponsors of terrorism. If you take a look at who this deal is with, it's just mind-boggling. There hasn't been a negotiated settlement. Now, there have been plenty of agreements, but they've never mattered a hill of beans in the Middle East peace process. And why anybody thinks there were all kinds of agreements. Nuclear arms, strategic arms agreements with the Soviets didn't stop them. The Soviets kept ratcheting up their nuclear arsenal. They kept building up their military, despite all the agreements we had with them that they wouldn't. It's the process that these people are celebrating. It's the process that they're claiming that they have conquered here. We got the Iranians to sign a deal. Big whoop. But they're going to run around and say it's something nobody else has done. We're the best presidency this country's ever had. Look at our achievements. National health care, a deal with Iran on nuclear weapons. Yeah, but what's the deal? Doesn't matter. We're the ones who got it. We got a deal with Iran on nuclear weapons. I don't know. It is very, very confusing. As I said, I hate being redundant here, but I think this is relevant. I think it makes a great point. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the idea of nuclear proliferation, the left hated it. They were animated. They did everything they could to stop it. Remember all the peace movement antics that they engaged in, the global peace march for nuclear disarmament, this peace march, all the protests, all the die-ins on the state of the Capitol building to replicate what would happen at the very moment of a nuclear blast. To all the Hollywood actors and actresses going on TV and bleating about the dangers of nuclear weapons and blaming every Republican president on earth for their spread and their proliferation and demanding that it be stopped. And the Soviet Union was looked at as the savior, even when Mikhail Gorbachev came to the United States for a summit with Reagan in 1986. Which, by the way, is where the first ever Gorbasm took place. Gorbachev arrived to the cheers of the American left, thinking that he was the savior. He was Mr. Sanity. He was bringing common sense to nuclear proliferation. Gorbachev was going to stop it. Gorbachev was going to convince Reagan to stop it. Gorbachev was going to make sure that Reagan didn't blow up the world. And now those very same people, and they're still around, many of them, those very same people are now applauding and encouraging and celebrating a Sharia law Islamic state acquiring a nuclear weapon. What happened in the interim? How did we get from the very same people applauding Iran getting a nuke to being steadfastly opposed to it with every fiber of their bodies for 50 years. All it took is one movie, the China Syndrome, and we couldn't build a nuclear power plant in this country, but we just told the Iranians, have at it, buds. You want nuclear power? We'll sign the bottom line for you. In fact, we'll even help you. We'll send you some centrifuges, and we'll just make a deal with you on what you do with your enriched uranium, and if you tell us that you're not going to make a weapon out of it, we will believe you. The same people are, and some people even in this administration have been in the past totally opposed to this. In principle, nuclear equaled bad. Nuclear equaled apocalypse. Nuclear equaled end of everything. Nuclear was horrible. Nuclear was immoral. Nuclear was unjust. Nuclear was unacceptable. And now the very same people are applauding the very spread of nuclear weapons to the Middle East in the hands of a nation that up until this administration had always been the bad guys. But now we are the bad guys, and the Iranians and the Palestinians, Hamas and Hezbollah, they're the good guys because they are the equivalent of the minority groups in this country who've been discriminated against by vile, evil majorities. Over there, it's the Israelis who've been the vile, evil, discriminatory majority. The Israelis have been the mean-spirited ones. And Hamas and Hezbollah and Fatah and you name it, why, they are the put-upon, oppressed, disadvantaged, poor minorities. And it's with them that we side. I guess the Iranians, since they are the allies of the militant Islamists, or the enemies of Israel, I guess they are our buddies too. Or am I missing something? Has something happened that I have forgotten or that I didn't notice that the left did all of a sudden start liking nuclear weapons? Is it that nuclear weapons are okay if they are under the control of, say, a really smart guy like Obama? Is it nuclear weapons and their spread are okay if somebody as compassionate and understanding and brilliant as Obama is in charge? Then we don't have anything to worry about. Nuclear power, nuclear weapons, that's fine and dandy. As long as Obama's in charge. What else could it be? Okay, I just heard Barack Hussein announce the terms of the deal with Iran. I didn't have a chance to make any notes because I preferred to smoke my cigar. But I did commit a lot of it to memory. And I'm just going to give you a summary of what I heard. He started off, I didn't hear the actual beginning, but for the beginning of what I heard, the Iranians for the next 10 years will remain 1 year away from getting a nuclear weapon. For the next 10 years. For the next 15 years, they promise they will not cheat. But if they do cheat, we're going to catch them because we're going to have more inspectors than any nation has ever had inspecting. They won't cheat because that's not who they are, but if they do cheat, we're going to catch them. And if they cheat, we're going to snap our sanctions right back on them. They have promised to never, ever develop a nuclear weapon, which was confusing because he started by saying they will for the next 10 years, they'll remain 1 year away for the next 10 years from getting a nuclear weapon. We're going to inspect the centrifuges. We're going to inspect all the uranium. We're going to make sure they can't store the enriched uranium underground, but we're going to make sure that they don't get a nuclear weapon ever, except they got to stay a year away from it for 10 years. And then in 15, they do this. It's the best deal that we've ever had, best deal we could ever get. My negotiators have been instructed by me to fully brief Congress and the American people, but none of this has been committed to writing yet, and there hasn't been anything signed. And when I heard that, I said, well, what is this? It's not on paper yet, and it hasn't been signed, and it won't be until this summer. But we got this framework here. And if this holds, if this framework works, it'll be the first time, the last time, the best time. The most secure resolution to a potential worldwide deadly problem ever. And it will have been done peacefully. And, of course, by me. But if they cheat, we're going to find out about it. They can't do anything covertly because we're going to have inspectors everywhere. And if they don't like having inspectors around, it doesn't matter. They can't kick them out. The inspectors are going to be there. And I'm asking them, who are the inspectors? The people that Saddam fooled for all those years? Well, do you have a question? What's the question? That's right. But that's not going to happen anymore. I know we didn't know about the underground where they were storing the enriched uranium. That we didn't know about that till a few weeks ago. But see, that's not going to happen anymore because now we got inspectors. And the inspectors are going to make sure that, Iran doesn't do anything covert, overt, or what have you. Don't worry about it. Now, and also, none of it's been signed yet. And that's not going to happen until the summer. And there is nothing written down. But there's going to be a robust debate. Very proud of the deal. His negotiators are going to present the details of the deal to Congress and the American people, and Obama welcomes a robust debate. But nothing's been signed, and it won't be signed. I don't know how you say, on the one hand, you got to stay a year away. He said this, 1 year away from developing a nuclear weapon for 10 years. It means that they can continue to develop nuclear and but they have to stay at least a year away from producing a nuclear weapon for the next 10 years. But then later he said they cannot ever produce a nuclear weapon. But then after all this, again, nothing's written down and nothing's signed yet. Now, I stand by one of my original theories that, the Iranians have been smiling for the past 3 or 4 days on all this. And even in the news stories, Iranian foreign minister, all smiles. I think the Iranians realized that they might have made a tactical error by not coming to some sort of agreement on March 31st. Because with Obama as a negotiating partner, you're going to get a nuclear weapon. So what's a day or two? Go ahead now and give him this framework, or even though it's a couple days late, let Obama save face by agreeing to something. And he can now go out to the Bergdahl Garden and make his announcement that we've got a deal with Iran when nothing's really changed. So he's allowed to save face. The Iranians, though, they're never going to have a better chance of getting a nuclear weapon negotiated as they do with Obama in office. So by all means, don't do anything that could weaken his position domestically. In other words, the mullahs, the Ayatollah Khamenei knows he's got to make Obama look strong to the American people and the American media. And I think that's what's going on here today. Who are we talking about here? We're talking about Iran, for crying out loud. And you are supposed to think Iran, peaceful, loving, agreeable, honest, we can do a deal with them. It's Indiana you got to be on the lookout for. Another question? You look at, what is your next question? What's the next question? What if they're lying? He said that if they're lying, they're going to get caught because we've got all these inspectors. It's not a problem. If they lie, they're going to get caught. And we're going to slap the sanctions right back on them. If they lie, if they cheat, and if we catch them, we're going to slap those sanctions right back on them so fast they'll not know what hit them. Well, if they're lying, they'll be closer to having the bomb. At some point, they'll have the bomb and they're lying. I think Obama just got rolled like an Easter egg. Timing appropriate. But we'll see. We'll see. How can you have a deal if it's not signed? You have a framework agreement. That's what you have, a framework agreement to proceed to a signed deal. You have a framework. That's what this date of March 31st was the date for a framework agreement. A framework agreement is what? It's merely the parameters that define how you go forward. No, that's not on paper. All this framework agreement is basically an agreement that we will talk about X, Y, Z, A, B, C. There's not a handshake because there's nothing to handshake on yet. The only thing they've agreed to do is to keep talking. But what Obama laid out was what the ultimate deal is going to be this summer when they get there. That we're closer to that than ever. This is what Iran in the framework agreement has signaled they are willing to agree to. But they haven't yet because nothing has been signed. And never forget that the regime said they might not ever even commit this to paper. We just had that earlier this week. I guarantee this press conference that he's conducting, and it's not, I don't know, it's a press conference, a statement at the Bergdahl Garden in the White House. I guarantee you this is for the low information consumer of news. This and the drive-by media to spread it. This is going to be a celebrated thing. You mark my words. This is going to be by us. It's going to be by our media. It's going to be heralded. This is another thing Obama has done that no previous president ever even got close to. You're making the mistake of imposing reality on this. They're creating an image that Obama is the first president ever to tame the beast that is Iran, the first person to bring them to their knees, the first person to get them to agree that they've got to not create a nuclear weapon. So, by the way, we get down to specifics on this. Obama says that if they cheat and we catch them, he's going to slap sanctions right back on. The UN will never, ever impose sanctions on Iran again. The Russians and the Chi-Coms will never allow that. And Congress cannot impose sanctions. Because it's all taking place here at the UN. The sanctions are gone forever now. We've lifted. All the Iranians have done is what they always do. They stall and they stall and they stall, and they throw enough crumbs out to make us think that they're getting close to agreeing with us. A tentative framework agreement. That's exactly what all this is. In the meanwhile, they continue developing. They got the sanctions lifted. That's essentially their big talking point today. They got the sanctions lifted. Nothing signed. So whatever it is they've agreed to is meaningless. There's no signature. They did. They got something tangible out of the framework agreement. The tentative framework agreement. Yes, they got the lifting of sanctions. What did we get tangible out of it? What did we get tangible in return? They promised that while we're talking, they won't develop a nuke, that they'll stay a year away. They promised they'll keep talking to us about it. They promised to allow the inspectors. They promised. They promised. They promised that they will never. Promises are not tangible. Oh, right. Well, then what do we get out of this? I'm trying. We had to get something. Kerry gets a Peace Prize. That would be tangible. We could touch it. I don't know. I have to take a brief time out, my friends. We'll be back with much more after this. Don't go. You're just this analysis. You're not going to do better than this. Don't doubt me. And we're back. El Rushbo here on the cutting edge of societal evolution. Grab audio soundbite number 24. This is Obama describing what's going to happen if there's any cheating by the Iranians.
International inspectors will have unprecedented access not only to Iranian nuclear facilities, but to the entire supply chain that supports Iran's nuclear program. If Iran cheats, the world will know it. If we see something suspicious, we will inspect it.
There you go. See? Iranians are cooked. They're finished. There you have it, man. If they do something suspicious, we're going to inspect it. That doesn't say we're going to do anything about it. It just says we're going to inspect it. Here is the beginning. This is Obama's preamble, I guess you'd say, announcing that the world has been saved.
Today, the United States, together with our allies and partners, has reached a historic understanding with Iran. which, if fully implemented, will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. As President and Commander-in-Chief, I have no greater responsibility than the security of the American people. And I am convinced that if this framework leads to a final comprehensive deal, it will make our country, our allies, and our world safer.
You heard that in there. Here's a if. He even emphasized, if this framework leads to a final comprehensive deal, it will make our country, our allies, and our world safer. If. Now, the Iranians, well, we've had plenty of examples like this in history where people came back waving, look at what I got. I got an agreement. They promised to leave us alone. They promised they're going to be good people. Now, we've been there, done that. And we know that the Iranians wouldn't take much. If Obama goes out there and huffs and puffs too much, and if Kerry goes out there and huffs and puffs too much, the Ayatollah Khamenei may say, you know what? These guys are humiliating me, and he might just say, you know what, I'm pulling back. I'm canceling everything that you think I agreed to last week. He can do that next Tuesday, which is their modus operandi. So, at this stage, there's nothing specific. Well, there are specifics that Kerry's going to announce, but we don't know what they are yet. So we'll just sit back. And we will watch, and we'll listen to the platitudes, because that's really the purpose of this framework, is for the administration to be able to shout their platitudes, their greatness, and all of that.